I came home early on a Tuesday because my meeting got canceled. I remember thinking, good, I'll surprise Diane, maybe order Thai food, watch something together. That was the kind of husband I was, the kind who thought surprising his wife with takeout was a romantic gesture. I put my key in the door quietly, not for any suspicious reason, just habit, and I walked into my own living room to find my wife of 11 years sitting across from a man I recognized, her coworker, Marcus, holding his hands across our coffee table, the one we'd picked out together at an estate sale in Vermont, and saying, in a voice I'd never heard her use with me, "I think I'm in love with you. I think I have been for a long time." She didn't hear me come in. Neither did he. I stood there for exactly 4 seconds. I counted because my brain went very still and very clear in that moment, the way a pond goes flat before a storm. Then I walked back out, pulled the door shut without a sound, sat in my car in the driveway, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, the second was to my financial advisor, the third was to my brother. None of those calls were to cry. All 3 were to begin. Here's what people don't understand about betrayal. The shock only lasts a moment if you've been paying attention, and I had been paying attention for about 8 months. The signs weren't dramatic at first. Diane started working late in February. By April, she'd changed her phone password. By May, she was going to girls' nights on Thursdays with friends she'd never mentioned having. I'm not a paranoid man. I'm an engineer. I observe systems, I identify anomalies, and when anomalies repeat, I take note. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't snoop through her phone. What I did was quieter and more thorough than that. I talked to a divorce attorney in March. His name is David Park, and he's been doing family law in our city for 22 years. In our first meeting, I told him I wasn't sure yet, that I might be wrong, but I wanted to understand the landscape. He told me something I've never forgotten. The spouse who prepares is almost always the spouse who comes out intact. I went home that night and started building a file. Over the following months, I made copies of every joint financial document, tax returns, mortgage statements, both retirement accounts, her 401k statements that I had legitimate access to as her spouse. I documented my contributions to our household, the direct deposits, the bills I paid, the home improvements I'd funded. I kept records of her withdrawals, which had been quietly increasing. 300 here, 200 there, nothing alarming on its own. Cumulative, it told a story. Our home security system had cameras at the front door and driveway, installed 2 years prior, after a neighbor's car was broken into. I had access to the cloud archive. I didn't watch it obsessively, but I saved it. Monthly backups, stored on a drive at my brother's house. So when I sat in that driveway making my calls, I wasn't starting from zero. I was pressing play on something I'd spent 8 months quietly composing. She came to me 3 days later. I had said nothing when she got home that Tuesday evening, just told her I'd eaten already, went to bed early. On Friday night, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table, our kitchen table, the one I'd built myself from reclaimed oak the year our daughter Lily was born, and she said she needed to talk to me about something. I put down my book. I looked at her. I said, "Okay." She told me that she had feelings for someone at work, that she hadn't acted on them, a lie I let pass, but that she'd been doing a lot of thinking. She said our marriage had grown stagnant. She felt like she'd been suffocating. She said she'd been reading about ethical non-monogamy and open relationships, and that she thought maybe, if we were both on board, it could actually save our marriage by giving each of us the freedom to explore. She watched my face the entire time she said this. I think she expected tears, maybe anger. What she got was stillness. I asked her to explain what she meant by open marriage. She did, with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this. She would have the freedom to pursue outside relationships. I could do the same if I wanted. We'd remain committed as partners and parents. We'd keep the house, keep our life together, just allow this new dimension. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "I'll agree to that, but I have some conditions." Her eyes went wide with relief. She'd expected a fight. She'd been prepared for a fight. My calm agreement threw her completely off balance, which was exactly where I needed her. That it would address how our daughter Lily, age 9 at the time, would be shielded from any outside relationships for a minimum of 1 year. that any person either of us was seeing would need to be disclosed to the other within 7 days of the relationship becoming physical. I laid each condition on the table like cards, methodical even. Her face shifted with each one. The relief curdled, the confidence soured. She said she'd think about it. I said, "Take your time." She never signed the agreement, because I believe she realized, sometime in the days that followed, that the agreement wasn't actually designed to facilitate an open marriage. It was designed to demonstrate, clearly and legally, that she had requested one, and that she was unwilling to operate under the conditions of transparency that such an arrangement would require. In other words, she wanted freedom for herself. She had no intention of actually opening anything. She wanted permission wrapped in progressive language. My attorney called it constructive documentation. I called it watching someone show you exactly who they are. I filed for divorce on a Monday morning, 6 weeks after that conversation at the kitchen table. Diane didn't know until she was served at her office that Thursday afternoon. I know because her sister called me 20 minutes later, crying, asking what was happening. I told her gently that this had been a long time coming and that I hoped we could all get through it with dignity. That same morning, I had transferred my direct deposit to a personal account I'd opened the previous month. Our joint savings account remained untouched. I had a legal obligation not to dissipate marital assets, and I honored it precisely, but no new income of mine would flow into it. My attorney had advised me on the exact line between protecting myself and overstepping, and I walked it carefully. I had already contacted our mortgage lender to flag that a divorce proceeding had been initiated, per their disclosure requirements. I had already spoken to the school about primary pickup authorization for Lily. I had already told my company's HR department that my marital status would be changing for insurance purposes. The machinery of consequence had been running quietly for weeks. Now it was simply becoming visible. What happened next, I didn't see coming. And I say that as someone who thought he'd seen everything. About 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, my attorney called me and said he needed me to come in. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard before. Careful, measured, like he was handling something fragile. I sat down across from him and he slid a document across the desk. It was a financial disclosure form, mandated by the court, listing Diane's assets and liabilities. I started reading, and about halfway down the liabilities column, I stopped. There was a personal loan, taken out 19 months ago, in the amount of $47,000. I had not been told about this loan. It was not connected to any joint account. It had been taken out in her name only, which she had the right to do, but the funds had been used, according to the bank statements my attorney had subpoenaed, in ways that would very much affect our marital estate. Some of it had gone to a short-term rental, an apartment, leased month to month starting 14 months ago, in a neighborhood about 12 minutes from our house. Marcus had a wife of his own. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. It wasn't the hot white anger people describe. It was something colder, more like standing in a room and realizing the walls are closer than they appeared. The lie had not been a moment of weakness or a stumble into something unplanned. It had been constructed, sustained, funded. For over a year, my wife had been maintaining a second life, with money borrowed against her future, while living in our house, sleeping beside me, sitting across from Lily at the dinner table and asking about her day at school. I told my attorney to proceed on all fronts. Lily was 10 by the time we sat her down to explain that her mom and dad were going to live separately. We did it together, at Diane's insistence, and I agreed because it was the right thing for Lily regardless of anything else. Diane cried through most of it. I held Lily's hand and told her that nothing about how much we loved her was changing, that the only thing changing was the address. Lily was quiet for a long time after. She's a serious child, always has been, the kind of kid who thinks before she speaks, who asks questions that are too large for a 10-year-old. She looked at me, and then at her mother, and then back at me, and she said, "Dad, can I live with you?" Diane made a sound I will carry in my chest for the rest of my life. I said, "That's something the adults are going to work out together, sweetheart, but I will always be here." Over the following weeks, Lily made her feelings known in the way children do, by asking to spend more nights at my brother's house where I had temporarily moved, by calling me first when things happened at school, by leaving her favorite stuffed animal, a worn gray elephant named Captain, in my overnight bag so I'd have to bring it back, a 10-year-old's architecture of loyalty. Diane noticed, and rather than sitting with what that meant, she did what people do when they're losing. She escalated. She told Lily that Daddy had chosen to leave the family. She told Lily that Daddy had a new girlfriend, which was not true. I know because Lily told me, verbatim, with the precise recall children have for conversations adults think they're not memorizing. I documented every instance. Dates, exact words as reported by Lily, confirmed where possible through her school counselor, who had independently flagged parental alienation behaviors to the court-appointed guardian ad litem. My attorney added it to the file. The file, by this point, was very thick. The custody hearing was in October, 11 months after I'd filed. I want to describe the courtroom not because I want to perform anything for you, but because it was the moment everything that had been quiet became irrevocably loud. Judge Patricia Holloway had a reputation as a practical, no-tolerance arbiter who had heard every flavor of marital dispute over 30 years on the bench. She did not emote, she processed. Diane's attorney led with my alleged emotional unavailability, a phrase so vague it amounts to nothing, and with the argument that as the primary caregiver, Diane deserved physical custody. He presented character witnesses. He presented a therapist Diane had begun seeing 2 months prior, conveniently. Then, David Park stood up. He presented the security footage from our home cameras, 7 separate instances over 4 months of Marcus arriving at our house, my house, where my daughter lived, during the hours she and I were away. He presented the financial records showing the secret loan and the apartment lease. He presented the bank statements showing marital funds used to furnish that apartment over the course of a year. He presented testimony from the school counselor regarding the parental alienation incidents. He presented Lily's stated preference, documented by the guardian ad litem, with the weight a 10-year-old's clearly expressed and consistent choice carries in our state. He presented a DNA test. I should explain. When the apartment was discovered, my attorney had advised that given the duration and nature of the relationship, and given that Diane and I had a period of reduced intimacy beginning approximately 20 months prior that she had attributed to stress, a DNA test for Lily was prudent. Not because I believed what it might reveal, but because in a proceeding this complex, certainty was protection. Lily is mine. I want that stated clearly. The test confirmed it without question, and I felt something release in my chest when David told me the results. Not because I had been holding genuine doubt, but because I hadn't fully realized how much uncertainty costs you until the certainty arrived. What the test also revealed, because the same lab on David's instruction had cross-referenced against the paternity inquiry Marcus's own wife had separately filed in a concurrent family court proceeding, was that Marcus had fathered a child with another woman during the same period. This wasn't my case to make, but it became part of the public record in a way that contextualized, for Judge Holloway, exactly the ecosystem of deception in which my daughter had been living. The judge awarded me primary physical custody. Diane received alternate weekends and 1 evening per week, with a parenting coordinator assigned to monitor for further alienation behaviors. Child support was calculated at standard state guidelines. The financial division was where the hidden debt became a defining instrument. Because the $47,000 loan had been taken out during the marriage and used on what the court characterized as extracurricular personal expenses, the apartment, gifts, travel, a substantial portion of it was assigned to Diane's side of the ledger. Combined with her 401k split and the equity division, she left the marriage in a meaningfully different financial position than she had anticipated. I left with the house. I left with my daughter. I left with my financial integrity intact. I did not celebrate in the courtroom. I shook David's hand, I thanked the paralegal, I walked outside into a cold afternoon and sat on the bench and breathed for a while. In the months that followed, the unraveling Diane had been running from caught up to her in the way it always does, not in a single dramatic moment, but in accumulation. Marcus's wife had filed her own divorce. The details of that proceeding, including the apartment and its financing, became local knowledge the way these things do in a mid-sized city where people know people. Diane's professional world is small. The mutual friends who had taken her side early, who had called me cold or distant or difficult, went quiet one by one as the fuller picture settled in. A woman who had been Diane's closest friend for 15 years sent me a message that simply said, "I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't know." I thanked her and didn't respond further. Diane had to leave the house she'd rented after the separation. The loan repayments, combined with her reduced take-home after the support calculations, made the math impossible. She moved into a smaller apartment. She changed jobs, though whether by choice or circumstance, I don't know and didn't seek to find out. The parenting coordinator reported in her quarterly assessments that Lily's time with her mother was improving, that Diane was showing up more present, less defensive, less prone to the triangulation behaviors that had characterized the worst period. I was glad to hear it, genuinely. Lily needs both of her parents to be functional. I want Diane to be okay. I need her to be okay for my daughter's sake, and I have enough self-knowledge to understand that wanting an adversary to suffer is a weight you're carrying on your own time. So I didn't carry it. The thing no one tells you about the end of a long marriage is that the grief and the relief arrive together, and they don't separate cleanly. There were nights in that first year when I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with the specific disorientation of reaching for someone who wasn't there and wouldn't be. Not for Diane, exactly. I think I'd been grieving the marriage for longer than I'd admitted, but for the shape of a life I'd thought I was building, the future I'd imagined, the version of Tuesday evenings that ended with takeout and something on TV. That grief was real. I'm not going to tell you the vengeance arc deleted it. It didn't. What it did was give me a foundation. Because I had done what was necessary with integrity and precision, I didn't lie awake wondering if I'd handled it right. I didn't replay conversations and imagine better versions of myself. I had been who I wanted to be under pressure. That knowledge is a quiet and very solid thing. Lily and I settled into a rhythm that surprised me with its warmth. I'm not a naturally effusive man, I think that's probably fair, but my daughter pulled something different out of me than anyone had before. We started cooking together on Sunday afternoons, nothing fancy, but she had opinions about seasoning and she wasn't shy about them, which made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. She got a telescope for her birthday, and we spent a lot of evenings in the backyard, her reciting constellation names she'd memorized with the gravity of someone presenting a legal argument, me listening and being genuinely astonished by her. A year after the divorce was finalized, I went on a date. A woman named Claire, an architect who designed public libraries and had the habit of talking about natural light like other people talk about music. She laughed easily and asked good questions and didn't need me to perform anything. We took things slowly, the way adults do when they've learned what slow is for. It was nothing like the beginning of something desperate. It was more like a door opening onto a room that had always been there. I didn't tell Lily about Claire for 4 months. When I did, Lily looked at me with that old soul seriousness of hers and said, "Is she nice to you, Dad?" I said yes. She said, "Good, you should have someone nice." I had to look away for a second. People ask me sometimes, friends who've heard the broad strokes, colleagues who've sensed something shifted in me, whether I regret any of it, whether I wish I'd confronted Diane earlier or fought harder for the marriage or handled any piece of it differently. Honestly, no. Not because I'm hard or unfeeling or because I wanted to destroy someone, but because every decision I made was deliberate. I never acted in panic. I never acted in rage. I chose, each time, to be the version of myself I could respect. And in doing so, I gave my daughter a model for how to move through the worst things with your character intact. If she learns one thing from watching me navigate those years, I hope it's that. There's a version of this story where I'm bitter, where I sit in a new apartment cataloging wounds, where every good thing in my life is shadowed by the one person who decided I wasn't worth honesty. I'm not that version. Diane wanted an open marriage. I told her I'd agree with conditions. And the condition she couldn't meet, it turned out, was the simplest one: transparency. That one word is the entire moral of 11 years. You can want freedom, you can want more than what you have. Those are human things, and I won't stand in judgment of human things. But when you look at the person across from you, the person who built you a table, who held your hand in the delivery room, who never once stopped trying, and you choose concealment over conversation, you don't get to call what follows unfair. You get to call it consequence. It's a Thursday evening as I write this. Lily is at the kitchen table doing her homework, occasionally asking me how to spell something, occasionally just humming to herself. Captain, the stuffed elephant, is on the windowsill where he lives now, a little more worn than he used to be. The house smells like the soup I have simmering on the stove. Outside, it's getting darker earlier now. The trees in the backyard are bare, and through them you can just see the beginning of stars. I'm not the man who walked into that living room and found his marriage ending at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I'm not the man who sat in a driveway making quiet phone calls into a future he couldn't see clearly yet. I'm the man on the other side of it all. The man who prepared, endured, and came through. And I'll tell you what that feels like if you want to know. It feels like the window is open, like the air is clean, like the life in front of me was always there waiting for me to stop holding on to one that had already ended. It feels like being exactly where you're supposed to be. And it turns out, that's the only place strength ever really lives. Didn't expect this to get so much traction. To everyone asking about Claire, yes, we're still together. She designed a reading nook for the corner of the living room. Lily calls it her library. That's all I'll say. Thanks for the kind words. Take care of yourselves out there.